So that takes us to taxes. Tax preparation sophomore and taxes 101. So I emphasize the 101. That's the beginning course in taxes. We will brush over some things, engage in a conversation, but we're certainly not going to be going into a deep dive in the complexity of taxes, especially for you guys in Summit when you have all these investments and case schedules and all that sort of thing. You're on your own. Let's see here. When I do presentations, I find that Dilberts are very useful. So I'm going out to California, I'm doing one, and I've got some Dilberts in there. And Dilbert hits the spot. What you're seeing is Dogbert, one of the characters, and the pointy-haired, clueless manager. So that's a little humor to start us off with.
It's true.
There we go. Okay, once again, do it yourself. You can manually fill out the forms, or you can use the tax software. The leaders are TurboTax and H&R Block and others. So we're going to ask some questions here. Tom, can you see the responses if people covers their screens?
I'm trying to get to that right now. I think if I do gallery view, I think I should be able to do that.
All right, I don't need a precise count. So if you use TurboTax, cover up your screen. If you use TurboTax, cover up your screen like this. Well, I'm not, all you're seeing is my presentation, but all right, you can either raise your hand.
I suggest using a reaction of yes.
All right, fine. So go down to the bottom of the screen, reactions, and yes.
Yeah, from reactions, you can do yes or no. So ask your questions again to just or
if you use TurboTax, say yes.
Why don't you do this? Say, click yes if you do, and click the red X, meaning no if you don't.
No, it doesn't matter. All we need is...
Well, it does, because otherwise we don't know how many people can't do it at all.
No, I'm going to get to that. All right, so we got a count?
13 greens.
Okay. How many people do we have on in total?
47, or at least there's 47 tiles.
47, 13 TurboTax. Okay, next question. H&R Block. If you use H&R Block, can you clear the yeses and reset it?
Done.
Okay, so H&R Block.
Five.
Interesting. Now, if you do not use a tax program and you're trying to figure out whether you want to, say yes. If you do not use it yet and you're trying to figure out which one to pick.
We have 2 yeses.
Interesting. So I guess the question is, we only had 20 responses. We've got 27 people who didn't respond. Okay. So the tax preparation approach, back to the screen, you can either use the software. It's anything from free, which I'll explain this time, to $100 or more. But more likely it's in the $35, $45, $55 range for the program that you will most likely need. Tax preparation professionals. Okay, so how many people use a tax professional to complete their returns?
We have 2 hand raised. I guess they count as yeses.
I would
7.
just comment that it's quite possible that people that do get their taxes performed professionally and are happy with that probably would not be attending this session.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just curious. Okay, so we've got a handful that are getting it professionally done. Now, finally, if your income is less than $54,000, there's a couple of programs. The federal program is VITA. Tom Tobich, you used to be in that?
I was in, well, they're very similar. I was in the art portion of it and I did it for the last 10 years, but I gave it up this year. And actually, they don't turn anybody away for income size, even though they encourage people who can afford to get the taxes done to get it done elsewhere. But
Right.
at least in my experience, they didn't turn anybody away if you made more, like you didn't get turned away if you made more than $54,000. There were some things that were excluded, like rental properties and things like that, that we just
Right.
wouldn't entertain. But otherwise, they are good, valid programs, and it's free.
Okay, good. So when should you hire a pro? If you're self-employed with inventory, W-2 employees, and you issue 1099s. Now, as it happens, TurboTax, I know, has programs. I have home and business version, so I can issue a 1099, which I don't need to, and I don't deal with inventory. But they do have programs that can deal with that. They're either home and business, which I have. I'm a 1099 business, LLC, or TurboTax actually has a business tax preparation program. So I have a suspicion that they deal with inventory, returns, all of the complexities of a business.
Yeah, Tax Cut also, or HR Block's program, which used to be called Tax Cut, also has a business version. I've
Okay.
never used that, so I can't address that.
Yeah, now I'll get to the prices later, but the business version I think is in the area of $125 or $150.
That's
So
probably
it's
about right.
if you're running a small business, that might be a fairly modest cost to keep things electronic.
But if you're running a business where you don't have employees and inventory, you don't necessarily need the business version. The premium versions of both do those kind of things.
Right. Now, for the business, all you need is Schedule C. And let's see, we'll get to the versions eventually, but I used to use Deluxe and it had everything, home office deduction and all that sort of thing. So I'll give you some pointers on picking the program if you haven't already bought it. By the way, the tax program was available at the end of the year. So I got it because I had to quickly look at some things in terms of my withholding and taxes. So it is available at the end of the year, and then you can do a quick run through of the taxes prior to the last quarter's payment on January 15th. Okay, so this is another Dilbert. This is Dogbert. And then he's got a guy there that he's advising. Okay. Does anybody use free filing? If you file for free, you get the free versions of TurboTax, H&R Block, or the others. Raise your hand or cover your screen. I suspect you Summit guys make more than $72,000 a year, most of you, and you've got Schedule B's, C's, you got Schedule K's. So
Well, it's not just that. If you do, if you do anything other than standard deductions, if you have any kind of deductions that you want to use, you can't do
yeah.
it. So
Okay,
it's
that's a
pretty
good
basic,
point.
and most of us are not quite that basic, even if the income isn't that high.
So if you itemize, which is smaller now, you can't get the free program is not eligible. You can't get it.
Typically, it's not. I mean, I don't know
Okay.
that across the board, but with Tax Cut, that's the way it used to be. With
Right.
HR Block, I tend to still call it Tax Cut because I've been using it for probably 25 or 30 years.
All right. Now, if you know people who are just getting into this and they want to look at it, tell them to go to the IRS. You can go to TurboTax and H&R Block. You would probably have to click a few screens and read carefully to get the free programs, but you know, there's a couple of ways of going about it. And by the way, they don't send you anything. It's all electronic. It's all in the cloud. Now, Tom, do you know with the free filing, if the e-filing for the Fed applies?
I would think it does. I don't know it for a
Right.
fact because I've never done that, but I would be very surprised if it didn't,
Yes, right.
but not for the states.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because the IRS wants to cut down on paperwork, and it would be in their interest to include the filing, e-filing. By the way, we've got time, so if you've got questions along the way, just either raise your hand or just sing out. I don't mind.
Question.
Okay.
I've got a question. You know, the thing I don't understand is why the government doesn't just blanket these free ones and get people to use them. I mean, it seems like the tax software companies just want to make some money off of these things.
Right.
Is that your opinion too? Why the IRS just because like a lot of people have simple filing requests, especially with the deductions gone. Why do we have to go through these tax softwares when the government could just put this online and you could fill it out online?
Yeah.
They take the tax laws are extremely complex and complicated. And I don't think the IRS wants to create the software. They've always delegated that out. Even when I did the Vital Like AARP things, in fact, they switched one year from one firm to another as to who was going to do their software. But I don't think the IRS wants to take on the responsibility of coding software for doing taxes.
And the other question is, from what I read, the IRS actually has almost all this information already for the simpler tax forms.
Yeah,
they do, but it's not put together. You know, somebody has to put it together. They can check to make sure that you include all your income very easily. Anything that they can do automated wise, they do, but they don't have people that do this stuff.
There was also an article in the New York Times addressing this issue, and they made the point that these companies are very good, very rich, and use lobbyists to make sure that they stay in business.
well, in defense of the industry, the for-fee tax returns, the United States has the most complex compliance system for taxes probably in the world. I've traveled overseas and I had to sign tax returns from a number of other countries, including Britain. When I was in Scotland, they had me sign the tax return for Britain, and it was 4 pages. It was a large page folded in half. So the United States just doesn't help it out. The solution that's come up every 4 years, of course, is the flat tax. The famous 15%, I think, has been floated many times. 15%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're ever going to do it. Think of all the people who make their income on doing other people's taxes.
Yeah, I know.
Let's stick to the
Program, yeah,
presentation and not get into these debates about the tax system.
Well, I don't mind a little bit of it. Okay, so tax records. What do you keep? W-2s, 1098s, 1099s, donations, medical contributions, real estate taxes. There's the 3-year rule. You can be audited for the last 3 years you've filed. The audit rate used to be 1%. It's probably now a fraction of that. The only other thing to watch out for was, has anybody been called upon to do a compliance audit? The IRS has the right to go out and at random pick people and have those people comply and show all the, well, all of the necessary receipts and back up for what they're charging, what they're claiming. Anybody had a compliance audit?
Al and I did, but it was about 30 years ago.
Well, you can tell us about it in general.
Let's just keep going with the presentation. I don't care if somebody had a compliance audit.
No, I'm sorry. I'm running the program and I get to ask the questions, okay?
Yeah, but I'm listening and I don't want to listen to it.
Well, you can always turn it off. So Steve, please proceed.
It was interesting, Alan. They really dug in on 401k, and I had to give them all kinds of information.
Yeah.
Went back and forth. I never appeared personally, but I sent information into the IRS, and at the end of it all, they said, "Thank you very much. You've done it correctly." So that was a relief.
Yeah.
You know, I have something I'd like to comment on, and with now that you're talking about being called in.
Yeah.
I had the state call me in, and they were questioning that I didn't file the state tax, and it was like 8 years ago. So luckily, I went and got my forms and took it down to some, wherever they wanted me to go.
Yeah.
And I still remember talking to the woman because they owed me $1,000, which for some reason, I filed the tax and then forgot about the return. And when I walked in, the woman who was doing it said,
Yeah.
well, it's been over 7 years, so I don't think you can't get your money.
What?
Yeah, but luckily the head of the department had just been walking by and he goes, oh no, that's not true. But for some reason, they went back over 7 years. And if I would have owed money, I would have had to pay it. Now,
Yeah. Maybe interest and penalties too.
I think,
Yeah, but-
well, for the federal government, I can't speak for the state, but they can only go back more than 3 years if they suspect fraud. And if you did something fraudulent, they can go back as far as, I thought it was 7, but Alan's slides say 6, but it used to be 7. And beyond that, they legally can't go back at you.
so
Yeah.
I
So
guess
the
the
6
state has
years
different laws.
and the criteria for auditing you is noted there. Okay. So that's tax records. And then we'll move on to the tax software review. This one was from US News and World Report. TurboTax and H&R Block have been neck and neck in all the reviews I've glanced at. I didn't go in and do a lot of them. I just wanted to give you a sort of a feel for how they rank. By the way, does anybody use Jackson Hewitt, Cash App, it's free, or TaxSlayer?
Well, the AARP program, or the IRS program through VITA and AARP, switched to TaxSlayer about 5 or 6 years ago. So I
Okay.
have used TaxSlayer when I was a volunteer, but I never
And
used it as an independent. I actually much prefer the approach of TurboTax and H&R Block.
Oh, I see. So tell us about TaxSlayer.
Oh, it does a good job. It's got everything in it, but it's complicated. You have to get used to it, because I've been using others for so long, old habits are hard to break. I didn't see
Right.
any value. You could put in backup forms. It does. I'm not knocking it, but it was hard for me to get used to after doing it a different way for so long.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
at that point in time, I didn't even know it was individually available. But subsequent to that, when they switched, subsequent to that, I know it's available as a fee-based program, but I've never tried it on my own.
Yeah, I didn't do statistics on how many are sold, but I has a suspicion that TurboTax and H&R dominate the software market.
I believe they do. And TurboTax is probably at least 2 or 3 times H&R Block, and the
Oh, I
rest
see.
are all pretty small.
All right, good. Okay, now for those of you who haven't bought it yet, actually TurboTax has a return program within 60 days. But I want to remind everybody that if you look at this chart, the one that makes the most sense is deluxe with state in terms of the price. So you get the electronic filing of five returns federally, and then the state return. But the state return electronic filing is not included. You got to buy it. When you get into Premier, the yellow things here, they add a couple of things that I'm not quite sure is a high value added item, aside from TurboTax and H&R Block adding $10 or $15 to it.
H&R Block has very similar programs, and I use the Premier version of H&R Block. And the primary reasons for that is for rental properties and things of that sort. It's not a whole lot more money. It's 10 or 15 or maybe 20 bucks more at most. And so generally I just get that to cover that as well.
Okay, good. Now the rental property module, that's particularly is it present there that it isn't present in the others?
I believe, well, for H&R Block, I believe that is true.
Okay.
I can't speak. I never looked at TurboTax for that purpose.
Right. Now, the reason why I formally used Deluxe was that it had Schedule C, it had the home office, and it had the business module. So that's what I needed.
Schedule the Deluxe, which I guess, I don't know if the names are the same in H&R Block, but the second level version does do almost everything. And for years I used it, but there were a couple of reasons recently why I had to go to which TurboTax calls Premier. But the difference is not a lot of money, so I just started doing it.
Yeah. Okay, and then I've given you
one other advantage of the TurboTax Premier, which is what I've been using.
Okay.
I use the online version.
Okay.
It does allow you to import all of your stock information.
Okay.
I think you can do that with the Deluxe as well.
Okay. It also allows you to do a Schedule C, but it doesn't allow you, if you have deductions off the Schedule C, you've got to buy the small business version.
When you say deductions, what aspects do you mean, Joel?
Like travel costs, equipment costs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
And they even have a little thing, unless you have more than a certain dollar amount, forget it. It's not worth the $69 extra or whatever for the business.
It's $20 extra, Sam. So it's not $69. It's, you're talking about the total price. If you have a business or you do those things, I think it's worth getting the Premier version of the software.
The primary driver
Not
for
a
the
bad
Premier
time.
seems to be rental properties, huh, Tom?
Well, that is one of the ones. That was the reason why I first went there. But there might be others as well.
Okay.
Andy Meyer has his hand up. Do you have a question, Andy?
Yeah, Andy, go ahead. You got to unmute too.
Got to unmute.
Hit your space bar, or there's something at the bottom left corner, right? All right. Ronald, what's your question?
It's not really a question, but I can't stay much longer, so I want to get this in. It's about a problem I had with one of the software programs.
Yeah.
The last century I used TurboTax. At this century I switched over to H&R Block because it was like $10 or $20 cheaper. And of course, once you get one, you're sort of stuck, because if you want carryovers from one program to the next, you got to stick with the same software. One year I was putting in a totally new form I was filling out, an investment that I never hit before, and I found out it was unique for that year because of something. And I put the information in, and it went through the whole thing, calculated the tax. A couple of days later, I went back in, and I realized I put some numbers in the wrong box.
Oh.
I take them from one box and move them to another. That's all it was.
Yeah.
So I took the numbers, put them in the other box, went through the whole thing, clicked on whatever. Nothing changed as far as my tax liability or refund. They have in the corners how much you owe, how much you get back. None of the numbers changed. And that seemed very strange to me because it was a considerable amount of money in the wrong location. So I did some more experimenting, changing numbers, doing things. Nothing changed. So next day, because this was late at night, next day I went through the whole thing to contact H&R Block. And I went through, and it wasn't as hard as as getting to some companies, but I did get through. And I said, look, I got a problem here. I put this number in this box. It was the wrong place. I changed it and put it in this box. And it went through and nothing changed as far as my tax numbers go. It doesn't seem right. What do you think?
It could be right. It depends on a lot of different factors. That's not in your.
Tom, please let me finish. So it took a couple of days, the 1 or 2 business days to get back. They get back to me and they said, okay, provide more documentation. So I went through, did some screenshots, this, that, and so on, sent it back to them. About a week later, they came back to me and said, we have a bug in our program. Well, I didn't say it that way, but they had a bug in the program, and they admitted that there was an error in their program in the numbers. And what the error was, if you put the number in on a certain place and you took it out, it didn't really delete it from the inside the program. It took it off the screen. It made it look like it was changed, but internally in the program, it didn't change. And this never happened before because, again, this was something that was a unique form or pathway that I went through for that particular year. So I said, okay, fine. And they said they're coming out with a fix. A couple of weeks later. Now this, of course, I started filling this stuff out in January, so I didn't, bunch up in April where there's a problem. So they went through and they said, okay, we got a fix. Download the fix. It was a general fix. They downloaded the thing. I went through and and nope, they didn't fix it. I got the same problem over again. And they went through and they, we said, no, we fixed it. We changed it. I said, it didn't change. And I went through and said the same thing again. Well, they came back a couple of days later and said, oops, we fixed it if you never entered the information in the first place. If the information was put in prior to the fix never eliminated it. It left it where it was. It only fixed anything that was new after the fix was in. So if I entered the information after I had the fix, it would have been correct. But since I put it in before the fix, it never zeroed it out or eliminated it.
All right.
You got to do another fix again. The point is, if you find something wrong that doesn't look right with the programs, contact the company. They will fix it, but you got to provide a lot of documentation because this was a considerable amount of money that was an error just because they didn't zero out a field and they didn't do it twice.
All right. The warning that I'm going to give applies to this problem, although it doesn't apply to software glitches. But when you fill the forms out, it is essential that you get all the information that's on all the forms, the 1099s, the 1099Rs, in the right boxes, even when they don't apply. If there's information in it, it is in your interest to make sure that, see, the IRS gets an electronic equivalent of the form you're looking at. And if you don't put it in the right box, you're going to get called on it. So I don't withhold. So I have the New Jersey ID number on my 1099s. So there's no withholding, so there's no reason to have it, but it's on the form, so I put it in the program anyway. Now, what we'll do is, in the interest of time, we'll take one more question, and then we'll move on to a couple of more slides, and then we'll take questions again, okay?
Andy, if you figured out how to unmute, you're first, and if not, John Tomaszewski looks like he's next.
All right, Andy, what do you got, Andy? You're still muted. All right, let's
go to John. We'll come back to Andy again later.
Okay.
Yes. I just want to say that happened to me a bunch of years back where I put some information in and then I went and changed it and nothing happened with the thing. So I just redid the whole tax form again. But my question is, does the state, the deluxe version do they all handle inheritance?
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know the answer to that. I would think that the premier versions do, but I don't know the answer to that. You can, check with them.
All right, thanks.
I'd be surprised if they didn't.
The The deluxe version, when it walks you through, you know, the interview, they call it the interview. It walks you through, and it does have a box to check off if certain stuff was inherited. I never had that problem, so I never went through that. But there is, you know, a feature that they, you know, you can put in something if it's inherited. I don't know how it treats it because I never.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't included, but I never had to try, so I don't know for sure.
All right,
It's
thanks.
a little bit of a guess, but typically you'd have to show information if it were an inherited IRA.
Yes.
But unless you happen to be one of the wealthiest Americans, you wouldn't have to show anything in an inheritance on your tax form because that's not taxable income.
Oh, that's true too.
Included. It's $11 million per person, Steve.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Any
below
guys
that
have a
threshold. I don't know
state's
about
worth
you,
more
Alan.
than $22 million.
Exactly.
That's a whole nother area. There are gift taxes and things of that sort, and you're supposed to file even if you don't owe taxes. If you give away money more than 15,000 a year to anyone, you're supposed to file a gift tax, which theoretically just lowers your 11,700,000 to 11,600,000 or something like that. But officially,
That's
you're
exactly
supposed
right.
you're supposed to file.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now it's up to 16,000 a year, by the way.
Uh-huh.
I think,
16
well, then
million.
this year, not for 2020. We're talking about 2021, so I'm still in last year. It was 15,000 in 2021. In 22, it goes to 16.
Okay, so back to the screen, the features. For those of you, earlier I asked about file transfers from brokerage firms and institutions. And Joel has indicated that he's done it successfully.
I've
and
done
he
it
checked it.
successfully.
You've done it too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it works quite well, both in TurboTax and in tax cut. You have to check what goes in because if you have a number of accounts, I have a friend who has an account for his granddaughter who he has the monitoring ability over, and when he didn't check the right boxes, so her stuff actually came into his tax form. So you have to check what's there. But as far as if you do it right, it's worked very well. And some of this stuff is tedious, so it really is tremendous. It's if you're doing your own taxes, it is one of the real benefits.
I do the taxes for our kids as well. And what's nice for those who are employed, you can download their W-2s from their employers.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. It avoids all the tedious inputting of those numbers.
So do you go out and get it, grab it and bring it in, or does this tax program?
They have a list of companies or financial firms that will include Fidelity and Vanguard and all that. You have to put in your password, and then they'll go get the information and it downloads it.
Oh, so it pulls it in.
In the case of a W-2, basically what you need is the employer ID, and then the name of the person and their social security number, and it will be automatically downloaded from the company's website. Interesting. It's really slick.
Yeah. Also, if you don't even have that, as long as you have a PDF of the document, they will read the PDF.
Really? So it converts the PDF to a readable format.
Yep. You do have to check it just to verify, but it does read it.
Yeah, right. Now, for those of you who have these programs and have lots of questions and want hand-holding, they always have the option. I think there's two different levels of advice you can get through certainly TurboTax and H&R Block. You can have the limited service. I think it's in the range of $50 or thereabouts. So that's $50 plus whatever you paid for the program itself. And then there's, I think, a deluxe option where you get to deal with a CPA or a certified tax preparer. And I think that's up in the range of maybe up to $150 or $200. So has anyone used those services, and how successful were they?
I've never used anything I had to pay for extra, but the program, at least the HR Block one, has lots of help within it that
Right.
has helped me out many times. And I have enough other resources like Publication 17 from the
Right.
IRS that I can usually figure the things out myself.
Yeah, so the
I
next
haven't
slide,
paid-
I'll
I
show
haven't
you how
paid
to get
extra.
help within the program, which I
Alan,
think-
if I could interject,
Sure,
since you asked, a number of years ago, I was doing taxes for my uncle who was in his 90s.
okay,
And had been using TurboTax, but at the time I saw H&R Block had this deal where for it was $29 additional. And when you got all done, you could have them audit it for you in person.
okay,
So since my aunt had been an employee of the railroad, she had that railroad retirement, which I had never heard of or seen. It's similar to Social Security, but it's much more complicated.
yeah,
So
it's
going
in the
through it,
program, by the way.
Yeah,
Pardon?
it is. It's
The
in
railroad
most-
income box is in the program.
Oh, yeah, no, it was in there and I filled it in, but I had questions as I went through and I would go to the help screen, I would read the questions and I was pretty confused, but I thought, okay, for the $29, I take it to them when I get done.
Yeah, right,
So when that time came, I looked it up and they said there's only certain offices were qualified. One happened to be in Short Hills. I made the appointment and I went over and I don't know if I brought a disc or whatever, but the lady put it on her screen and starts paging through. And I said, well, here's my question. And she didn't know. And she said, well, I think you should do this. And I said, but here's what the system says. And she said, oh, no, then you don't want to do that. And this went through about 3 different places in the filing. And she really didn't know. And I concluded that there's not too many railroad workers in Short Hills. So anyway, when I said to her, so I guess I owe you $29. And she said, no, I can't charge you. She said, I learned more than you benefited from it. So I left there and I filed it. I never heard a word after that. It must have worked. But that was my experience with the additional charge thing.
Oh, well, to clarify, the $29 was a fee to go into an office and speak to someone about it, right, Roger?
After you had completed it, yes, they would then put it on the screen, they'd go through and they would do it like an audit, like you do. The
Yeah,
systems
right.
do that already, but my questions were, did I do it right?
By the way, H&R Block, I think I've got some numbers later, but they've got about 6,000 offices maybe, and they're very common in Walmarts. So if you want to talk to people and you got a Walmart nearby, it's possible H&R Block is there.
I've had an experience with TurboTax
Okay,
in which I did call TurboTax's general number
yeah,
for assistance. And they do, we buy the CD version of it for processing, and they do track that account information. So I've usually found the TurboTax person to be very helpful. The
okay,
problem that I ran into this year was that the state of New Jersey had made a mistake in one of its releases of software earlier this year, which said that you couldn't submit your taxes electronically if you had an entry in line 62. So
okay.
I looked there and I didn't have any entry. And she said, oh, we've gotten so many calls. I talked to TurboTax. We've gotten so many calls. There was an error in the state's last download, and she established a case number for me, which I'm sure she did for lots of other people. And the state of New Jersey fixed it in the next release, which was within 2 days.
Yeah, Adrian, I think I came across that because last week I did my return, including the state, and it would not finalize the state because it said that 2 forms in the New Jersey return were not approved by the state. But last night when I went in and updated it, it cleared it.
Yes, mine cleared also. Mhm.
All right.
If you have this software, they do at least HR Block. When I initiate it, it always tells me if there's a later update, so I can electronically get the later update, and that's worked fine for me any number of times. So there are lots of, the politicians change the taxes at the very last minute. It's not so easy to code all the right things immediately. So there are lots of times where certain forms are not available until February or even March.
Yeah, I was surprised, but suffice it to say, update don't decline the updates when you open the program.
Yes, no, you shouldn't do the update. And it's usually very quick, 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, listen, we're going to get to the next screen, which is the one that's been in there for a couple of years. But to remind everybody, within the program, first of all, if you see my cursor, it tells you what you owe. And of course, when you put all your income in there, there's lots of big numbers until you get to withholding. So don't get excited early on. But the thing I want to remind everybody, and it sounds like many of you know this already, but on many lines, if you do the interview, you have to answer a question, yes or no. But you will see learn more on the general question and learn more on the answers. So my experience has been that it's been okay. It's like a cut and paste thing, but it does provide additional content, but I don't know if I concluded that it was great. Now, has anybody else had experiences about all these help?
Yes, I've
links?
used them and I find them, it's not always a direct answer, but usually I've found there's enough information there that, or they make me think a different way that I can figure it out. I mean, I found them to be very helpful.
All right, good. So next, tax code changes tax year 2021. The standard deduction has gone up. I think it's indexed. This is the usual stuff about individual rates. Many people, because of this size of the standard deduction, don't itemize anymore. By the way, how many of you itemize now versus didn't itemize before? And if you itemize, can you characterize what's happening, like maybe medical expenses and things like that?
Yes, sorry, Alan, can you make the question clearer so we know whether yes or no is appropriate?
Well, many of us now use the standard deduction in the tax program because of the size of it, and we no longer need to use itemized deductions on things like medical expenses and things of that nature. Is there anyone now in this tax year or maybe last tax year that in spite of the standard deduction, the size of it is still itemizing, and why you're itemizing, like maybe medical expenses?
If you have very high medical expenses, you have to get, it depends on whether you're single or married as to what you have to get to, but have taken in 2018, they took away most of the miscellaneous deductions, and state and local income was capped. So I had never in my adult life not itemized until 2018, but I have not been able to since then. But where the difference would come is if you have very high medical expenses.
The other reason to itemize specifically medical expenses, New Jersey has a lower threshold.
Yeah, it's 2%.
So that even though you don't qualify on federal, you could qualify on New Jersey.
Typically,
Yeah.
do.
The other
Joel
reason you might
brings up a
itemize is
point to make sure that you put all the information in there, even if it doesn't apply. So I put in the medical information. I try to get it in the ballpark. I don't research everything, but I put it all in there. And the program will figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah, the other reason you might still be able to itemize is if you have high charitable deductions, particularly if you're smart about it and bunch them in year end to cover 2 years.
Oh, right. So Steve is talking about a technique called bunching, I guess is the nickname for it. You combine multi-year donations into 1 year, and then you go over the threshold for the deduction, standard deduction.
But you can also probably many of you know, but if you have an RMD from an IRA, you can have your RMD or your financial firm donate money to your charitable causes, and that is a way to not have it taxable. In other words, if you had a $50,000 RMD and you wanted to give $10,000 to your church or whatever, you can have it sent from your financial institution directly to the church, and then you will only have to file for $40,000 of an RMD. So it is a way to get a charitable deduction that's independent of taking the standard of itemizing as opposed to taking the standard deduction.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. But you can't then double dip by claiming that 10,000 as a charitable.
Yes, good point, Steve.
Yeah,
Now,
right. No, but I mean, it's a way, if you're close and you can't get to, if you don't have enough to itemize, it doesn't matter, and you're still getting a charitable deduction for it because you're not paying taxes on it. If you can itemize, it doesn't matter. It's not worth doing.
Yeah, it's a backdoor charitable contribution.
Well, it's an alternative route. Now, you're all aware that required minimum deductions are back, and you should have withdrawn it to your taxable account by December 31st. The penalty, by the way, theoretically is 50%. So, and it applies for 2022. Steve brought off a point a couple of meetings ago that with the stock market being the way it is, you may want to consider taking profits on growth stocks to sock away the money for your RMD for 2022. That's going to be need to be withdrawn by the end of this year. But that's your decision.
You can also point out that the tables that determine what is your RMD have changed this year.
Well, the RMD, as I understand it, is based on your age, aside from maybe the table you're talking about, and the rough percentage. This is my first RMD, and I think it's like 2 or 3%, and it'll go up a certain increment every year I get older.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there's a new table for this year. It's not the same as the old table, so they've actually lowered the percentage.
It did.
They revised the table because we're living longer, and so if for identical circumstances for 2021 versus 2022, you'd have a smaller RMD in 2022 because the tables have been revised.
Right.
Oh, I see. All right. But in any case, I go onto my financial program, Fidelity, and it's already told me what my RMD for this year is.
Yeah, it's based on December 31st of the last year, so that you can, if you have Fidelity,
You
you
said
go to
you were
Fidelity, you
trying
can
to
see
pull
what
out
your
stuff for
RMD
the
is
taxes.
this
Yeah, but I wanted to see where you're pulling and what you're pulling and all that stuff. You already started.
Hey, Ron, mute.
I have not put any numbers in.
Ronald, mute. You can have a conversation with your wife offline.
Hey,
Okay.
two things I'd like to add. One is that I think the change in the factors for the RMD is for 2022.
Yes.
So, you know, whatever you should have done back in 2021, that is what it is. But 2022, the RMDs you will have to take in 2022 will have somewhat different factors. Not that it makes a huge difference. The other thing I wanted to mention about RMDs, I have professional tax preparation. Somebody at H&R Block that I've been going to for probably close to 10 years.
Okay.
And I happened to ask the question this year, hey, have you ever gotten a question from the government, from the IRS, about taking RMDs or the size of the RMDs or anything like that? And the answer was no, not really. And so I was a little surprised, but there doesn't seem to be any clear-cut connection between what's going on in in your IRAs and information to the government, and it's really up to you to figure out or to accept what your broker might tell you about what your RMD amount is, and to do it. It sounds like, and I'm not trying to encourage any illegal activity here, but it sounds like it's sort of a blind spot in the government's eye. What you do taking your RMDs.
I have to disagree. I believe
Yeah.
my fidelity statement has my RMD on it. They generated. I don't have any. I mean, I could not give them instructions to take it, but they're going to generate and send to the 1099 includes my IRA data, my RMD data. They send it to the government, and the one thing the government still does do is they do checks because they can do it automated, and so they will catch if Fidelity or whoever you're using says you had a $50,000 IRA and you only file $30,000 in your taxes, they'll catch that.
Yeah.
No,
Rich,
no,
there's a form that you get from Fidelity or all the others. It's 5486, and it gives the value of your IRA, each of the portions or in total. So that goes to the IRA electronically, and then all they have to do is get the computer to match up that number times the percentage versus what you're reporting. So I'm not sure it's a blind spot so much as it is maybe they've got lots of things to do, and they've found out that the compliance on that is fairly high.
I don't think it's a blind spot. I don't think it's a blind spot at all. I have something from Charles Schwab telling me what my RMD is for this coming year, 2022.
Right.
And it says, quote, "You're required to notify the IRS that you have an RMD due for the tax year 2022.
Yeah.
Now, they don't say that they notify the IRS what the amount is, but they probably do. But it says they notify the IRS that there is an RMD that's due.
All right.
In addition, in your tax filing, you are required to tell them what the value of your IRA was in the previous year. That plus they have your age. So even if they didn't get anything from a financial institution, they could figure it out themselves.
Yeah. All right.
Why
So
did, earlier you said the theoretical amount was a 50% tax penalty.
yes.
Why did you use the word theoretical?
Well, I had a friend that had multiple accounts. He missed it, and he told me he went to the IRS and pleaded, and they didn't assess the 50% because he did it in January after he discovered that he didn't pick up the one institution. And then my father prepared taxes, and it was common for him to write letters and beg for forgiveness from his clients. You know, the IRS is not a bad institution. They're just overwhelmed.
So yeah, the net is the penalty is 50%. It is conceivable that you could get a forgiveness for a portion of it. But you don't really want to go through that.
No.
That's not good.
Not when it's a 50%
I just wanted
penalty.
to make a quick comment on that topic before we left, and that I have found that of course, the RMDs are calculated by different firms such as Fidelity that was mentioned, or Vanguard.
Right.
And I've actually talked with some of them, and I'm convinced that they're pretty careful about that number, and that they use the updated life expectancy table, during the appropriate year. So that is a good number to compare against. So I always calculate what RMDs I would have due. But I always check that by looking online to see what has been calculated by these different firms. And I've always found it agrees.
Good point, Adrian. Now, in addition, I round up to the next $1,000 or more. My wife's going to spend it anyway, so I might as well play it safe. Right?
Yes. The QCD has an advantage in that it deducts from your income. We've talked about this before, but if you're at a bracket where on the IRMAA under Medicare, you might move from one bracket to the other. The QCD has the effect of reducing your adjusted modified gross income, and that may help you to stay in a more advantageous position.
That's a real good point.
QCD? What's QCD?
Qualified charitable distribution. It was the last bullet on the thing. So you can have the executor, Fidelity or whatever, send the money directly, or you can also have checks made out to a charity from your account, in care of your account, and that can come to yourself, and you can submit those checks to the charity. That may be helpful if you need to have a supplementary note in there about what account it should be credited to.
All the big financial firms, probably, maybe all of them, definitely will help you do that. And you can give as little as $100, and you can give as many as, I mean, I don't think there's a limit to how many organizations you can give to. So if you wanted to do, 30 donations of $100 each, they would probably work with you to do that. They'd either mail you the checks or they'd mail it directly, depending on which you choose. But it has to be made out to the charitable organization. It can't be made out to you for you to pass through.
And as a reminder, you may want to do that in early December rather than leave it too late. And to remind everybody, you can either have it sent directly. I had the check sent to me because my company matches it, the educational institution. So I had to put a letter from Exxon in with the check to remind them, which they knew already, but it helps with the paperwork. So that's the qualified charitable deductions.
As an interesting point, I worked for IBM and they used to match at 100%, and then they matched for retirees at 50%. And as of now, they don't match at all for retirees. Just
Ditto for AT&T.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. It's all disappearing. We always have Social Security, right? I mean, I don't need it now, but the way things are going, I may need it at the end.
Yeah.
Hey, when I worked at Dun & Bradstreet, they matched the educational by three times the amount.
Yeah, mine did too. They reduced it to 1. The employees at Exxon still have 3 to 1. So, all right, listen, tax savings. The most prominent tax savings, aside from all these little tweaks that you guys are engaged in, to remind you, and I came across them, you get credits for example, caring for elderly parents. The one that's probably easiest is energy efficiency. So insulation, solar panels. By the way, has anybody done solar panels and deducted them? Or insulation?
What, can you deduct the entire cost of this thing?
It's probably up to a limit.
There's a limit?
Yeah, well, in the past, they used to, I don't know what they currently are, but it used to be like if you had to get, if you got energy efficient air conditioners or furnaces, you could get up to a $1,500 credit. And it might cost you,
I did solar panels. And the feds.
Marla, is that you? Tell us a little bit about it.
We installed solar panels in 2020.
Okay.
And we also installed battery backup along with it. And I was surprised that the federal deduction was on the total amount.
Okay.
I thought that they would portion it into 2 pieces and only accept the part associated with the solar panel, but it was the entire installation.
Well,
and in the state of Virginia, actually, we're in Fairfax County. So there's a property tax deduction where they take the value of the entire installation and net it against your property tax for a period of 5 years. Now, what it is though, is in the federal deduction, it goes down by 2% each calendar year. So we did it in 2020. It was, I think, 26% of the investment, and it was just about a $52,000 total project.
Wow. Careful, Marla. All these guys are getting excited.
Yeah, I know. They love it when you talk technical.
All right.
Out of curiosity, Marla, have you done a calculation in terms of how much you're saving in the way of energy versus your install cost?
I haven't netted it out, but during the summer, we actually had $7 electric bill, which was kind of sweet. So I would say in the worst months, it's worth about $70 a month. In the best months, it's worth several hundred. It will do a payout in about 7 years. But the whole thing is it's a for sure thing, and it's based on the current cost of electricity. So we only know that electricity will probably go up. So that equation will only improve.
You might get a 5-year payback, which is pretty good.
Well, and again, because we did the battery backup, we have 4 or 5 circuits in the house which run on batteries in the event we have a power outage. And so we've identified the most critical circuits for those. And so we have things like the blower for the our gas furnace, our security Wi-Fi, and a couple electrical circuits. So it's kind of nice to be able to get on your computer in a power outage.
A win-win.
Hey, Tom, maybe we should have Marla come back and talk to us about solar panels and money.
Yeah, it's technology. We could have a whole session on it.
Yeah, how's that sound, Marla?
I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I could take up an hour or an hour and a half. Probably the goobers who installed it would be happy to have a technical discussion, but it is kind of cool.
Yeah. All right, good. Okay, now the other credits are the electric car credits, but someone's going to have to remind me. I understand these electric car credits are either limited by the manufacturer or globally. There's so many, they use them up, and then that's the end of it. Does anybody know?
I know something about it because I've received that credit.
Okay.
The credit was if you buy an electric car,
right,
and the company that you bought it from has not yet sold 200,000 of them in the United States.
Right.
So GM and Tesla are no longer applicable for that credit.
Now, is that for this year or last year?
I got mine in 2018. So.
Okay. All right. So now the tax savings for your kids, this is probably not for any of you, but I came across child tax credits. Boy, there's a lot of money in child tax credits. Paid leaves, expanded unemployment benefits because of the pandemic, health savings account. By the way, we are eligible for health savings account. And then finally, educational savings accounts now applies to all education costs, including elementary, secondary, and college. Does anybody have a health savings account that they set up?
No.
If you've got lots of medical expenses, we are eligible for it, even at our age. All right, so that's.
Don't you have to have earned income to do that? Not investment income, earned income.
Well, that's
Probably.
a good, but you get retirement and things like that. So.
Yeah, but
That's not considered earned income.
Oh, well.
I don't know for sure, but I mean, it's usually, it used to require earned income. It probably still does.
Okay. That's a good clarification. Okay, consultants. Very briefly, I'm a consultant. I use this extensively for those of you who have it. It's a W-2 versus a 1099. Perhaps your kids are going to set it up. They're tired of being a W-2 slave and they want to work on their own. But the basic routine is you get a federal employee identification number. That's an EIN. You register with the state. When I registered my LLC with the state, is one of the easiest things I ever did. And then I pay them $50 a year. You need to have earnings 2 out of 5 years or some numbers of years in a group. I'm not quite sure about the 2. I'm fairly certain about the 5.
It's 2 out of 5. It's to differentiate, some people have hobbies that they earn some income from or take
Right.
losses on. And so
Right.
they want to see, in any 5-year period, they want to see at least 2 years where you've made money.
Oh, I see. That's a good point. It applies to hobbies too, right?
Yes, yes.
You're going to have to go out and sell that stuff, guys. Okay, and then you can have expense deductions, car, home, business meals. I take my wife out to dinner. We talk briefly about my 1099 and I expense the meal. And I don't feel guilty about it.
You have to keep track of the expenses though, and you have to have documentation.
Yeah, I know. Now, the other, the biggest kicker is the simplified employee pension. It's 20% of your net income. So that's a biggie. You have to take the actual after profit monies and put it in an SEP. It's like an IRA. It's in a different account, but it's tracked. Okay, I'll leave it at that since I think there's applies to very few of you. Now, this one was left over from last year. So Tom, I'm going to have to see what applies here. The text, the New Jersey tax changes.
I believe it's still the same. I think we've reached the maximum levels of what you can deduct. I mean, I think already last year, it's not going any higher than 100K, but if you make more than $100,000, it completely goes away. But for somebody who is under 100K, you can, in New Jersey, probably pay no taxes.
Okay. All right, good.
The veterans thing still does exist, and that's an apply once kind of thing. If you are a veteran, you apply and then you automatically can deduct $6,000 or property tax of $250 from your gross income, and you won't have to pay taxes on it. And once you set it up, they automatically, you can just put it on your tax return and they automatically allow it. But it has to be officially set up. And at least they used to insist on copies of your, what do you call it? The papers that you get when you get out of the military.
Well, the
DD 214 is what I understood.
There were two voices. I didn't catch that.
What's interesting about this is that they don't define veteran as being what I used to think of it as a veteran. Like I myself was in the National Guard. I was in active duty for only 6 months. So I don't qualify for things like going to a VA hospital, for example. But yet I do qualify for this.
That's right.
Tax credit.
But the VA hospital is a federal government designation essentially, and you're talking about the state of New Jersey. This is a state of New Jersey program, so they can define them differently.
Right, exactly.
Now, did you get the DD 214? Is that essential?
Yes.
And then, by the way, as I remember, you have to get a copy and you have to file it physically. You got to mail it somewhere?
I give it to my accountant. I got a copy of it when I was discharged.
Okay.
You did have to, at least it used to be that they didn't accept electronic copies. You had to mail a copy, and not necessarily the original, but a copy of your discharge papers.
I did that and came back very quickly. The state was absolutely no questions. One more thing, Harvey, something I learned as a reservist was we served, as you say, 6 months. I think it was 180 days actually. And my understanding that I learned years later was if we served more than 181 days, we would have qualified for the veteran.
That's correct. That's why
Yeah.
I know that there were people in my National Guard unit in active duty who were sick for one reason or another, and they were discharged from the hospital before the 180th day. They were sent to a civilian hospital.
It's funny because
That's naughty.
I really wanted to get out, but I guess one more day would have paid off. Yeah.
Okay, so there's veterans, there's the website. So it sounds like most of you already know about this. If you want to pass it on and tell people to make sure they get it, they're
I believe it
eligible.
was originally 2018, so most of us have had a few years to file for it or whatever.
Okay. Okay.
Another point worth noting is that on your state taxes for New Jersey, you're not limited to the $10,000, 10,000 state and local income taxes. It's 15,000. Contrary, that's just for the state, contrary to the federal.
Make sure you get the correct numbers in the program and it figures it out. Okay, the state return. Most of you, I suspect, get deluxe with state or above where it includes the state. It is worth it. And I generally owe money, including this year. So I print it and mail it on this year. It's April 18th, by the way. The electronic filing is additional. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly up to $30, maybe as high as 50.
For the state return on TurboTax, it's $25 plus tax.
25? Okay, thank you.
Plus tax. But it's it seems ludicrous that they charge for it because you would think it would be to their advantage for us to file electronically.
Well, I'm sure they figured all that out as to what's best for them and what's best for us.
Well, but if they do it this way, I mean, my New Jersey tax return is, I don't know, 6-7 pages typically. I print it and mail it.
Yeah.
It costs me 50 cents, 60 cents, I guess by now.
I put this last comment at the end about these unapproved forms or this hiccup with the program that I think Adrian mentioned recently. It looks like they resolved it. My state return has been cleared within TurboTax. I haven't printed it, filed it. By the way, I go through the program a minimum of 3 times because the first time I went through it, I blew through it just to make sure I got everything, and I missed my home office deduction. So, which is my case is a biggie because it's a handful of thousands of dollars of business deduction. So it's worth making sure you get everything right, especially income. I missed an income item, 1 return. And a year later, the feds sent me a notice saying you missed some income. This was the value of it, and this was my recalculated taxes. And when I looked at the marginal tax rate, it was lower. So something happened where they recalculated the return, and I don't know what it did, but I was paying less than I theoretically would have paid if I'd filled the program out, but maybe the program would have figured it out then. So they send you, and they send you a voucher with it. Send them a check, and that's the end of the story. Okay.
I'll comment also. As of last week, I actually had 1 federal form, which was not finished yet.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that it's done now, but they make the IRS makes the new forms each year, sends them to TurboTax or other, and then they have to put them into their software. So there's always a little bit of a delay there.
Yeah. Now, if you're getting money, sounds like you guys can go ahead. If you're paying like me, I'm going to wait till April. Sorry, go ahead.
It did.
Who was it?
It was Edward.
Background noise on somebody.
Oh, all right.
He muted.
Okay. So to remind everybody once again, get all the information and all the boxes and all the forms into the program. They know it's electronic. It's real easy. It's just matching box numbers and values. And then finally, after you finish your taxes, everybody see this at the end?
Yes.
So this is your audit risk scale, and this is mine actually. So I'm feeling pretty good right now. I don't know if it's unwarranted or what, but I'm clearly in the green zone.
I did, Ellen, if I could, I did want to offer something that had to do with the downloads of dividend and other forms from the financial firms.
All right.
I found an interesting thing this year. One of the companies had put that service to a third party.
Yeah.
And so the third party was a different physical address of the payee.
Okay.
They said that it was the name of the third party company as an agent for the one that you were expecting to have. And I actually found a difference in what was downloaded versus what was available on the website from the original company. And exactly what you've been saying, you must match those forms. I haven't had any personal experience with that, but if the addressee, if the payee was listed as a different entity, as a third party entity, that looks to me like it isn't a matched form. So I made it to be matched.
Well, Adrian,
So
let me suggest this. The important things are the values and the identification numbers. Those are critical. I have a suspicion that the address may or may not enter into the IRS having a high interest in it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the employee identification number is unique. So,
Alan, backing up just a little bit, I did a little checking on HSAs and Medicare.
Okay.
And apparently you cannot contribute additional monies to an HSA if you are on Medicare.
Okay.
If you do have an HSA, you can continue to use it. That's one that you built up in the past prior to being on Medicare. But after 65, you can't put any money into it.
All right. Sorry, guys. Steve has gotten you out of the box. Can't do it. I was only suggesting something that was potentially possible.
Yeah, Alan, this is Hank. I did some checking also, and for 2021, the New Jersey income exclusion is 150,000, up from 100,000.
All right. Thank you. I'll correct that. Okay, so that's the audit scale. Filing and refunds. I got some information about this that, and then Tom mentioned it earlier, that there's still a huge backlog with the IRS, probably the state, of paper returns. So I don't know if you're waiting for a refund or what, but this sounds like it's last year's refunds, not paper returns, not this year.
If you don't have to use paper, don't use paper.
Yeah. Now I've filed electronically. The feds, the IRS, have committed to getting you the refund in 21 days. So that's 3 weeks. I've seen it in a couple of places. Have any of you guys filed already and gotten your money?
I have. And it came back maybe in about 10 days.
I was going to say, typically they beat that. Typically it's less than 2 weeks is what it was last year.
All right. So there you got it. They're in good standings with Steve.
Absolutely.
I assume with such quick service, you're asking for the refund to be directly deposited to a bank account or checking.
If it goes to a bank account, it comes a lot
Absolutely,
faster.
Harvey. Absolutely.
It's a lot faster going to a bank account than if you ask for it, because when I did my volunteer work, there were people who were uncomfortable having it go to a bank, or maybe who didn't even have a bank account. And we
Yeah.
would try to talk them into it because it was a lot shorter, and there were people who just wouldn't do it that way.
Now, let me also remind everybody that a critical piece of information about getting your refund electronically sent to your bank account is called a bank routing number. And every year I call Fidelity and I verify the bank routing number, because it's this big long thing with, I think it's got 4 or 5 zeros in the middle. But I asked them to read it to me slowly. It hasn't changed, by the way, I think in 3 or 4 years, but nevertheless.
It's on your, if you still have physical checks, it's actually on the physical check that you can check against. It's
Right.
printed at the bottom of the checks.
No, actually, Fidelity's electronic number is different than the physical. Well, there's something different about the electronic number.
Okay.
Believe me. So the moral of the story is get all the numbers right.
I think Tom is talking about the routing number for your personal checking account, which has nothing to do with Fidelity.
That's true.
Yeah, I know, but it's my, the routing number first has to have Fidelity's bank and then my account.
So is your checking account at Fidelity?
My brokerage account.
Is that where you get the money sent to, though?
Yeah.
Okay. So most of us just get it sent to a checking account, which is in the bank.
And if you can't find your routing account and your account number, I'll give you mine and you can use them.
What a guy. What
Spoken like a true
What a
thief.
service. And then is there a fee? You're actually giving them their money?
Yeah, I have a couple of K1s that I'm waiting for, and one is supposed to come in at the end of February and the other the middle of March. So I just can't file until those things come in.
You know, well,
K1s are tough.
My son has a business and I never get his that I'm an investor in, and I never get his K1s before the end of March. So I don't even start my taxes until March because I can't finish. So
yeah, what's a K1 in general? It's an investor in a business.
Excuse me?
Limited partnerships.
Yeah,
it's limited partnerships generally.
Okay.
Like MLPs, for example.
Yeah.
Master limited partnerships.
All right.
One of my rules of thumb is to avoid any investments that might require a K1.
Well, yeah.
as a general rule, I would agree with it, but no, this is my son, so.
Well, you find me something else that's paying 7 to 8% interest, then maybe I'll take your advice.
Yeah, well, I have to ask how your how your investment amount is doing, as well as the interest that you're getting.
All right, so the reasons for delays, it's the same sort of thing this year, except the feds have figured out the ways to check people. You now know, and probably this is the third year you've put in your driver's license number in there, the return. You get a PIN. But the computers are working, but a lot of the people are not. There's still fraud detection filters, so bear with them. And aside from the software glitch that was mentioned earlier, the errors tend to be people not putting the numbers in the right box, as I've done a couple of times. Now, we had an Exxon guy last year that had some kind of investment where he had to send money in at the beginning of the year. I forget what it was, but he physically sent checks in, and the IRS sent him a did not receive notice, even though he wrote the check, he took a picture, and then he paid it the second time. And then he paid it a third time until they sent him a notice that they got the first one. So the only thing I can tell you about getting notices is you can try to call the IRS, but if you're pretty sure about what you've done and you have records, you know, when you write checks against all these brokerage accounts, they have them electronically. They can get you the copies. And I don't know what to tell you about getting sent a late notice and making the second payment. Okay. Finally, if you get into problems, this is the second year I've included this. The IRS has an advocate service. And I got to tell you that it sounds like a bunch of IRA agents that they send in these offices, and they actually help people. You know, it's like they aren't part of the Enforcement Bureau or the Recording Bureau. Their role is to help you. And certainly at one time, I would have to verify it, they had an office in Springfield, New Jersey.
They did even last year yet. It was right
Okay.
on Route 22.
Okay.
I haven't looked recently. I haven't been by there, but it was there last year.
Okay.
I went over there one time and they told me, that was in the Diamond Head building. They told me the actual advocate was across the highway in a building. So I went over there. This was a 3-story building. I got to the door and it was locked. And it had no sign on it, and it just locked door. And these 2 people came out on a smoke break. And I said to them, is the IRS in this building? And they said, the IRS is this entire building. And I said, well, I was here. I was going to ask for an advocate. This goes back again to my uncle's taxes I was doing. And you couldn't get in the building. Absolutely not. You couldn't, we're not admitted.
So no wonder they have a good reputation as advocates.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
The website looks okay.
I guess if you can get through to someone, you're probably right. But I struck out.
Oh, all right.
Well, the thing that used to bother me about the IRS is even if they give you advice, it can be wrong. They wouldn't necessarily support it.
Another story. I went to that Diamond Head building on 22 that you're talking about, and I remember getting there. It was it must have been 98 degrees, and all the reserved parking places were taken. Right, so I parked across the lot, walked across, came up, got upstairs. It's about 1 o'clock, and I get there, and there's a guard at the door with a gun, and he said, "What do you want?" I told him. He said, "Well, we're closed for the day." And I said, you know, I just couldn't believe it. And I said, I thought, well, he's carrying a gun. I guess I better go home. But you couldn't even get in the door.
Gee, Roger, you're blowing my story about the IRS tax.
Well, they leave early on Fridays in the summer, I'll tell you that.
All right, extensions, filing date, April 18th. Extension is Form 4868. The new filing date is October 17th, and in bold, you got to pay all your taxes by April 18th. If you don't know what they are, maybe you ought to overpay it by a bit to make sure that you don't get into a problem. Anybody file an extension for various reasons?
I've done it numerous times. It's
Okay.
automatic. It's just a piece of paper that you send in with your social security number and, and your check if you think you owe money.
Right.
But it's automatic, and it used to be 2-3 month periods. It's now 6 months. If you send it in, that's because I get the late K1s that at times I just don't have the information in time to file in April. And so there's been a number of years where I've filed in early May or mid-May, and it's automatic. And if you file the federal one, you automatically counts for the state as well, for New Jersey anyway. I can't speak for all states.
So they're linked. Okay, so we have gone through a lot of questions, answers. Any final comments, questions?
I have one.
Okay.
I know everybody knows that I'm an iPad bigot and I hate turning my computer on. And I always say the only thing that I do on my computer now is I do my taxes.
All right.
Well, guess what? There is now a TurboTax for $39. You can now do it on your iPad. So I may be putting my computer to sleep.
Oh, congratulations. Well, no,
I
that's a
feel
good
more
piece of
comfortable doing
information.
it on my computer because I store the files and do things. I don't think I would, I don't think I would yet, even if there was an iPad version, I don't think I would use it yet.
Yeah, but it's all push button.
Yeah, no, I know, I understand where you're coming from, but I like having backup copies and things that I can store a little easier.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem was that I purchased the TurboTax when I saw it on sale someplace, and so I have to wait till next year before I can use it.
Yeah, Alan, this has been very helpful, and I hope you'll consider doing it again next year.
Okay, Steve, thank you.
I was going to ask that question, is there, do most of it, meant there are still 31 of us on, even though we started a half an hour late and it's now 1:30 past 1, it's almost 2 o'clock.
Well, part of it is a few slides that I put together, but of course, everybody's stories helps correct what I've got up here. And it's good to know how people have gone through this.
But
I think we got one question left from Jim.
Yes, hi. Thank you for your time and effort to put this together. So this is not about taxes, it's about docket. I too use docket.
Okay.
And when I checked to see if they had my information correct, they had my 2 doses, but they didn't have my booster. And then I started thinking, I wonder why that happened. Then I realized I got my booster at Walgreens, and Walgreens had my name as Jim instead of James. And so I went back to docket and found, yes, I have 1 shot under Jim and 2 under James. So I called up the 800 number for New Jersey and talked to them, and they said, well, here, fill out this form and we'll get that fixed. And in fact, they did. And it was very straightforward. They were very quick about it all. And so now I'm all under James just fine.
All right, James, good job.
Very good.
Tom? Tom, you have a question? All right.
Okay, I have a question. Every year, the IRS updates about 40 numbers for inflation, the tax brackets and various things.
Right.
I think they made a mistake in at least one of those numbers.
Huh?
And it's could somebody just use what do you think is the correct number? Or is the IRS number considered to be absolutely correct all the time?
Oh, my impression would be to use the published number.
Yeah, but that's the
Unless
number
you want to get into a big argument with the IRS and go to tax court and all that.
You should use, it's not for numbers like that, but I don't know, 10 or so years ago when I was the first time that I was trying to file electronically, I got bounced. And after researching it, the reason it wouldn't accept me is because they said that my spouse's birthday didn't match, the birthday I put down didn't match their records. Well, I had the right number.
That's a different sort of thing.
They had the wrong number. They had, May 6th instead of May 16th. And they wouldn't let me file electronically because of that. And there's a whole long saga that I don't want to go into now.
That's a different sort of thing. I'm talking about a published number. They come out with a revenue procedure each year to update their inflation numbers. Okay, based on the inflation rates, they update certain numbers, about 40 numbers. And one could show mathematically that they've made a mistake. So what do you do?
Well, I would suggest using their number
because
the advice I got when I had this other problem was to change my wife's birthday. And I wouldn't do that because that would only create other problems down the road. Okay, but these things get checked automatically. So if you don't use their number, the chances are it's going to bounce.
I just watched the latest version of Catch-22 and it sounds like one of them. All right, Tom, you go ahead and fight it. And when we get together next year, you let us know what happened.
Well, suppose I just send you my paper that shows they're wrong.
Well, you can do that, but if you're going to file
chat.
something, I'd suggest you use their number for now and correct it later after they change it.
Well,
It's
it may
good
not
that
affect
if it
me.
is an error, go, please
I
raise it
don't
with them.
see. I don't know if it actually affects me. It's something that's kind of obscure. It's the section 199A thresholds. Okay, I don't know if that even affects me at all.
Okay.
And if it does, it may not. It actually may be to my advantage. I don't know. I don't know how it would affect me or anything, but it could potentially affect millions of tax
Yeah,
returns.
yeah.
That's the
Well, I think you
problem.
should try to notify them, but they don't make it easy. They don't answer their phones.
Well, I
most
was
of the
thinking
time.
about that taxpayer advocate service. Maybe just tell them.
Oh, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
you could write a little explanation and send it to them. Tom's going to send out the presentation.
I'm
The
gonna
website's on there.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Last questions, comments? Good
No.
luck with your taxes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for once again.
Thanks,
doing that.
Alan.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
efforts.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye now.
So long.